Senator Chris Murphy is also among them and is now calling for Israel to change course in its war with Hamas. In a statement, he wrote, in part, the current rate of civilian death inside Gaza is unacceptable and unsustainable. I urge Israel to immediately reconsider its strategy and shift to a more deliberate and proportionate counterterrorism campaign. Joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. He's a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, I appreciate your time. I have to be honest, your statement last night, which came before the letter from 13 senators, was a take notice moment. You are a critical voice inside the Democratic Party on these issues. You are a critical voice that the White House pays attention to. Why did you decide to put out this statement now?
So let me first be clear. I don't think we can square the world's moral order. I don't think we can protect America nor Israel if Hamas isn't held accountable. And so I believe that Israel has to continue the fight to end Hamas's military capabilities to be able to strike Israel again. I simply believe that the current level of civilian casualties inside Gaza is too high, both from a moral perspective and a strategic perspective. What we have learned in our own country's counterterrorism operations is that when you are too permissive of civilian casualties, you kill a lot of militants, but you also create a lot of terrorists as well, because that civilian harm becomes bulletin board material for terrorist recruiters. And so I want to see Hamas's military capabilities defeated. I want to see Israel keep up this fight. But with 3,000 children dead inside Gaza today, that number is just simply too high. And I think it's time for Israel to be more targeted and more thoughtful in the calculus it makes when it decides where and when to strike.
So for the purpose of clarity, because in these types of situations in particular, the language is so important. Precision is important in the language. You're talking about shifting of strategies, being more targeted. The letter you signed on to with 12 of your colleagues calls for a cessation of hostilities. There have been talks about a humanitarian pause. These are not ceasefires, correct? You're not calling for a ceasefire.
That's correct. Hamas needs to be held accountable. And well, because right now, a ceasefire, which sounds to me an open-ended cessation of hostilities, would simply allow Hamas to regroup to attack Israel again. And you heard yesterday directly from the leader of Hamas that Hamas is not done, that they are intent on murdering more Israeli civilians. And so I just don't believe there's a choice to be made between continuing to take the fight to Hamas and reducing the number of civilian casualties and being able to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. There are going to be civilian casualties here. That is a consequence primarily of Hamas hiding itself in civilian infrastructure. But when you decide to hit a target, you have to consider the value of the target versus the scope of the harm to civilians. And I think there are many cases, whether it be the refugee camps or some of these apartment buildings, where the civilian casualty numbers have just been far too high.
The importance of public statements from U.S. officials, from folks like yourself, as Israel conducts these operations, how much of this is trying to some degree, lay the groundwork for what comes next and try and maintain relationships in the region? And I ask that because you heard from Jordan's foreign minister saying he's going to tell Blinken the war must stop. You've heard public statements from traditional U.S. allies in the region saying things publicly we assumed they would in opposition to Israel's course of action, but also growing harsher and harsher in their condemnation.
So I think this is a really difficult needle to thread, because we are, of course, first and foremost, trying to hold Hamas accountable. Second, we are trying to stop the spread of this conflict. We do not want Hezbollah coming in from the north. It is very hard, if not impossible, for Israel to fight a two-front war. But then lastly, we have to think about what comes next in Gaza. And if Hamas is displaced, both militarily and politically, then there has to be a follow-on governance structure inside Gaza. And it is likely that Israel's Gulf neighbors, its Arab neighbors, would need to take part in helping to stand up that government. And so you want to be able to keep those countries willing to come in and help stabilize Gaza after this military operation is over. And so when these civilian death counts are so high, it makes it more likely that there's a second front opened, potentially in the north, and it makes it less likely that you're going to have other Arab partners come in and help on the back end. And I think that's in part why Secretary Blinken is back in the region again.
You just said that it's very hard, if not unlikely, that Israel could fight a two-front war coming in about an hour and 15 minutes. We're expecting Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, to give his first significant public statement. Does that mean that if Hezbollah launches that second front, the U.S. would have to be involved?
So that will be a decision the president will make, and that'll be a decision that Congress makes. Obviously, we have moved significant assets to the region to deter both Hezbollah and Iran from entering this war. My sense is that, the evidence may not suggest Iran knew about Hamas's attacks ahead of time. If Hezbollah launches an attack from the north, that would be done with Iranian support and knowledge and permission. So we're trying to send a message right now to Iran and to Hezbollah that there could be consequences, not just from Israel, but from the United States if they decide to enter this conflict.
Senator Chris Murphy, we always appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.